Turning now to the White House, where President Trump says that he has fired National Security Advisor John Bolton. This is the third advisor to leave the position in the Trump administration. The president says that he disagreed strongly with Bolton on foreign policy, but Bolton is pushing back, saying that he left the position on his own. Nicole Killian is in Washington with more on the relationship between both men and the Republican response.
Foreign policy hawk and National Security Advisor John Bolton is out of a job. President Trump announced the departure on Twitter, saying he disagreed strongly with many of his suggestions.
John Bolton's priorities and policies just don't line up with the president's.
Bolton reportedly opposed the widely criticized plan to meet with Taliban leaders at Camp David and was also against the president's warming to North Korea and willingness to engage with Iran. Some lawmakers chalked up the split to basic chemistry.
Characters and personalities that just didn't get along. And sometimes you can't say why that is.
The president and Bolton even disagreed about who decided the departure. The president implied he fired Bolton, while Bolton claimed he offered to resign. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also acknowledged he and Bolton didn't see eye to eye.
I know everyone's talked about this for an awfully long time. There were definitely places that Ambassador and I, Bolton and I, had different views about how we should proceed.
Top Democrats called the ouster a symbol of disarray within the administration, while members of the president's own party had mixed reactions.
A big loss for the country to not have John Bolton as a part of the senior team on foreign policy.
I think it's a good thing for the country, a good thing for anyone who advocates for a more realistic foreign policy.
President Trump says he will name a replacement next week. Nicole Killian, CBS News, the White House.
So here to explain is CBS News senior national security analyst Fran Townsend. Fran was also a Homeland Security advisor during the George W. Bush administration. Fran, thank you for joining me. And during that time, you also worked with Bolton.
I did.
So I'd ask you, how long had you been there? You said 17 months. But I remember when it was first announced, everyone thought he was a very unlikely candidate for that position. Everyone knew his point of view because he was on Fox News all the time talking, right. And they knew that it was often in opposition to what the president had thought. So when you heard about this, were you surprised?
Well, I think when John went into the job, he understood, I think as most people do when they go into a senior position, there may come a point when I disagree with the president's approach. Yeah. If that's in my policy area, I have to make a decision whether I'm willing to stay or whether I'm going to depart. And so John is a very principled guy. As you say, he's got a strong point of view. The president knew that when he hired him. And I think, quite frankly, you know, when you look at the notion of inviting the Taliban to Camp David several days before the 9/11 anniversary, you could understand how there might have been lines for John that he just couldn't go beyond.
But we're hearing reports that John Bolton wasn't the only one who thought it was not a good idea. We're hearing reports that the vice president did, that the secretary of state did. But it's John Bolton that's walking out the door.
That's right. I mean, look, I also don't think John was fired. I think it's pretty clear, you know, you look at their other news reports today that the president didn't tweet that he had asked for his resignation until after John had submitted the resignation letter. And so it's not clear what happened.
Right.
The president has his view, John's got his view. The point is, there is no president since the establishment of the National Security Advisor job. No president has burned through 3 national security advisors in 3 years. So that ought to be a message to whoever's coming next.
So what does that say, though, about this administration's sort of ability to plan long term, the stability when it comes to this area?
You know, it's interesting to me because there are times when you and the president may disagree on an approach to a particular problem, or there may be nuances and disagreement between the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State.
And do you think it's a good thing to have differences?
It is a good thing, right? Because you get to hear different points of view, the positives and negatives. I don't think that's a bad thing. But if you grind that out, if the president indicates he doesn't want any dissent, I don't think the president is well served by that. I think he needs to hear differing points of view and then be in a position to make his own best judgment about the way to proceed.
What I thought was always kind of interesting about John Bolton in terms of his public presentation is he didn't mind saying, yeah, I know that you probably know where I stand on Iran, but now I work for the president, and so my job is to tell you what he thinks.
Right.
Which is sort of different than some of the other people who, you know, kind of like fall right in line with what the president, you know, very robustly defend the president's perspective, with and really push to show that there's no daylight between the two men. John Bolton didn't mind saying, yeah, you know, we have differences, but this is my job.
Right. No, that's right. Once you take a job working directly for the President of the United States, you understand that your job is to represent him, and everything you say is measured against everything he says. And so if you can't do that, if you're unwilling to put your own personal views aside, then you shouldn't stay in that job, because the president is entitled to have someone who's going to defend and articulate his position.
What do you make of John Bolton tweeting out, hey, listen, no, I resign? Like, this is not a guy who's going quietly, obviously.
Well, look, I think it's unfortunate. I don't really think if I were the president or I was advising the president, it doesn't really matter. If you wanted him out and he resigned, or if it doesn't matter, he's gone now, let it go. What the president and the White House don't need is some public dispute with John. And why humiliate him? I mean, frankly, the president in the same tweet said he thanked John for his service. And so, I mean, I think the tweet from the president was a bit of a mixed message. And I think, you know, this taking public sticks at people who've worked for you, I think chills the idea of people coming in, right? You want to attract people, you want people to be loyal to you, you have to show them a certain amount of dignity and respect.
Very quickly, who do you think might be waiting in the wings to take his position?
You know, I think it was CNN who reported a long list of 10 people. Any list of 10 people is a list that only those people put their names on. That's not a White House list, right? And so I think there isn't a front runner. I don't think there's a short list. But I think that they're going to decide pretty quickly. They won't want to leave this position empty.
Any advice for that person?
Well, I think you better know what the president's expectations are. And for me, I would not, that's a job you can't take unless the president is comfortable with a disciplined policy process, which, as we know from many public reports, there has not been in the White House.
Yeah, really. Listen, before I let you go, of course, this is the 18th anniversary of the September 11th attacks here. When you look at the state of our national security now, is it better than it was then?
We are absolutely more capable at preventing and detecting terrorist threats and therefore disrupting any plots against us. Nothing's perfect, but I think we should feel good and confident about the system we have built to keep us safe. Having said that, I think we have to recognize, having defeated ISIS and taken the caliphate away, they haven't been totally defeated. We're seeing a resurgence. Those threats continue. And frankly, the biggest concern I have about terrorism in this country right now is domestic terrorism.
Fran Townsend, thank you very much.
You're welcome.